Correspondence. Okay, on to presentations. 9.1. Jonathan Hack, Director of Sierra Planning and Management, which is with regards to the road allowance survey and process update. And councillors, this is an update only. There are no decisions, obviously, tonight on this. So we will have our presentation, then go to questions from council. Hello, Jonathan. How are you this evening?
Very well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to provide an update. So good evening, everyone, and members of staff and the public that will be participating as well. So as you mentioned, this is an update to a piece of work that is ongoing as we work through as careful a process of consultation as possible. So I think Charlotte's going to kindly just flip the slides for me. So Charlotte, if you could do the honors on that first one, thank you. So the next couple of slides are just for a reminder to bring everyone back into the picture. The road allowances that we're talking about, there are about 7 of them, stretching from the west, from Lorraine, Weaver, Pinecrest, Cedar Bay, Silver Bay, Wildwood, Pleasant Beach, and then of course Holloway Bay Road as well. I hope I haven't missed any there, but if I have, we can return to them. They're all under study, that much I can assure you. And that's just a graphic there to remind us. What we're interested in, just for everyone's benefit again, is that these are road allowances, so they're public rights of way down to the beach ends of those road allowances. So they're not designated as public parks, meaning they're not operated as such by the municipality. There have been concerns about the impacts on residential amenity, as well as health and safety on the beach, and how that is within the public right of way, which is typically the 66 feet. Council has, through management, has commissioned us to look at some longer term solutions that may involve a range from the current enforcement practices right through to potential physical changes to improve the opportunities there. Next slide, please. Again, just to emphasize, these are just some pictures that we had taken back on some field work back in the fall, and it's just to indicate the range of differences. The one there just in the center of the picture, Weaver Road, is where there is an outflow operation down to the lake, and it is in no way sort of classified as a beach where the public would go and visit. The survey results sort of show that's not really one of these locations that warrants attention, other than the appropriate signage for members of the public that do wander down there or cycle down there as well. And some other, obviously, just to make the point, that top one is just a view from the Pleasant Beach Road right of way across the Shirkston Shore properties. Now that obviously is just a natural bay. You can see the kite borders there in the distance. This was in the early fall of last year, and it's a pretty magnificent spot. So we have to deal with some reality that people are going to come and congregate in these locations. So what do we do to try and improve it? The first thing is to make sure we speak to as many people as we can. So next slide, please. Yeah, just as a reminder for everyone, again, I was last invited just to speak to council just during the period at which we were doing a survey of residents within a particular zone. And that zone was essentially road allowance in the west, so Lorraine over to Holloway Bay, and then north to Highway 3 and Kalele Street. And if you'll recall, there was some concern on the part of interested citizens and beach users that we needed to have a broader public survey. And I think I articulated at the time that we have a particular reason we focus on a zone, but we wanted to make sure that we do make the survey as available as possible to everyone. And so we took that into account. We extended the point of the survey because of the difficulties that everyone faces in dealing with a closed border and the problems with the pandemic. There were also some considerations to make sure we tried to get as much input from property owners that live south of the international border. And I think that worked out pretty well in terms of how the results we got. But the consultation plan, as directed by management and certainly as endorsed by council, is to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's in terms of doing the right level of consultation. So we've slowed down a bit in terms of our work to try and focus on this. And this evening, I want to give you that update. But just to summarize, we're talking to the public at large, certainly, of course, talking to property owners within that zone. We've talked to and can continue to do so potential commercial partners, cottage owners, and of course, importantly, once we come back with some more concrete solutions, that will be run firstly through senior management and then, of course, council and the public as well prior to any final recommendations. Next slide, thanks. So certainly don't intend to read everything on this slide. So just to give you some highlights of it, about 42% of those respondents within the main survey zone did indicate that their properties front onto one of the road allowances running north-south. And that was important because that's how people from outside of the area access these beach end road allowances. They come down those roadways, and then there is the issue, as everyone is aware, of whether they park, how do they park, how far do they walk, what is the level of amenity, and that impacts property owners. So that's a relevant metric for us as well. Just to indicate that we were very interested in the ownership and those that are within that zone I spoke about, as well as people who live elsewhere in the city and elsewhere in the region, and in some cases out of region that responded to the survey. About 57% own their properties or have owned them for more than 10 years. So we're dealing with people that know the area very well, and their views expressed, are therefore highly valuable based on that longevity. About 40% of those within that survey zone that I spoke about are seasonal residents, meaning it's not their primary residence, so it's their summer cottage. And very interesting from our perspective, about 30%, almost 1/3 of respondents within that survey zone indicated that they believe their properties have deeded access to the shoreline. And just for everyone's benefit, deeded access just means that regardless of whether you front onto the beach or otherwise, if your deed somewhere in the details of it indicates that you are enabled to get onto the beach, you have a right of access, then that is something that is essentially a right of title to that property owner. And that's something we need to take into account. And it furthered the opinion that making any changes to these road allowances, which might limit access for residents as well as visitors, but primarily for residents, was something that may be certainly problematic. And it was not necessarily part of our thinking. But as we did indicate earlier, it is necessary to put the full sweep of options open to the to City Council when we conduct this kind of research, from essentially closing those rights of way through to making sure that they're as usable as possible for all comers. Next slide, thanks. I'm going to go through these as fast as I can because there's a lot of data, and happy to take any questions that you may have. But I want to just focus on highlights. Otherwise, it will be a long evening in this regard, and I know that you want to get through to other items. So, firstly, the overall number of responses: 475 responses from addresses. That's people who responded from within the zone, which is, just to remind everyone, from Holloway through to Lorraine and up to Highway 3 and Kalele. 295 out of zone. So they could have come from any number of places, generally in the region, generally in the city. That's about 770 in total. That's a great number in terms of statistical validity and more importantly, just being a good representation of people's interests and views. That's about 60% in zone, 40% out of zone. And you can see there that we asked the question, what's the closest road allowance? It just tells you, one of the things we wanted to find out is which of these 7 roads, because you're going to look at them differently depending on where you live, which one are you closest to, because we know that's the one that you're going to have the most interest in. And you can see there, a big third, 31% Pleasant Beach Road, Wildwood at 12, Silver Bay at 17%, and so on. So a good representation. Next slide. Thank you. This one is important because it indicates reasons, and any number of reasons were allowed to be reported. We did give them closed questions, I believe, on this particular one. So, you know, tick a box as to which one applies. 90%, and these results are broken down. As you see, the lighter blue is for those in zone, out of zone, the darker blue. But you'll see there, foot access to the beach, pedestrian access to the beach is very important. Treating it as a public space for enjoyment, whether or not they actually, there is an ownership that runs down to the high water mark, for example. Generally speaking, and in talking to people, the ability to be able to get onto the beach and just walk and take in the ambience is something that is part and parcel and generally accepted. Obviously, we'll hear from people if otherwise. That's different than other questions that we get to. Okay, if you could just let's just move on a little bit. As I said, pedestrian access is most important. Next slide, please, Charlotte. Thank you. Just to go through this in just a little bit more, with a bit more speed. The questions are where are the problems? Parking in front of driveway, etc. Rather than focus on the details here, you'll see for the vast majority of respondents, it was an insignificant issue. Where it is significant in a very significant manner, it's generally in the Wildwood and the Pleasant Beach area. Again, this just confirms what we know in terms of where the volumes of people are coming and parking for access to the beach. Next slide. Parking on the shoulder, but not in front of your property. Again, you can see the weight of response there. To focus less on the sky blue, but more on the greens. And you can see that, again, in terms of where there is considered to be a significant or a very significant issue, it's, again, sort of Pleasant Beach, Wildwood, and to some extent, Silver Bay as well. Interesting from our perspective, Holloway Bay Road, which doesn't have a road all the way down, but we know is a concern, has prompted Fort Erie to be looking at that in terms of its future as well, and we're taking that on board in our work here as well. Next slide. Littering, again, you can see just by focusing on where the density is of those greens, you can see that 34%, 31% for Wildwood and Pleasant Beach report it as being a very significant problem, and progressively less elsewhere. Next slide. Illegal dumping, same again. Importantly, though, Holloway Bay represents some additional concerns there as well. And my brevity here is not to suggest that these things are not of significance, relatively speaking, in the other road allowances, but just for time, we need to focus on where the key outcomes are from this work. Next slide. Noise disturbance, ditto. Again, it's more on those areas to the east. Next one. Perceived trespass on properties. Excuse me. And again, this one is more interesting in that When we talk about perception of trespass, rather than sort of, you know, it being documented as an actual trespass, you can see that property owners, excuse me, in a number of areas have some level of concern. And so we'll need to look at that in terms of signage and education throughout these road allowances. Next one. Washroom access, again, of more significance in the Wildwood and Pleasant Beach area. And so that's where we are going to be focusing in terms of, if you do provide more amenities on or close to the beach, that's where you may seek to do it. Okay, next one. Now, these sort of remaining slides are very important because they enable us to measure people's tolerance or willingness to consider different ways to improve essentially the operation of those road allowances as it relates to their amenities and protecting their residential amenity. So what we've done here, I just need to read out what those measures were that we offered in the survey, and people were able to add others as well. But fencing, the first one, fencing sufficient to prevent public access entirely. So remember, we're going from the sort of fairly draconian measures that you might put in place through to those which are just nibbling around the edges of what you currently do and asking people's general tolerance towards it. So fencing to prevent public access entirely. And then just going left to right on your screen, maintaining the current policy of vehicular gates, which, as you can see there from the results, that was a popular measure. You can see that sort of royal blue bar. That means it's a popular measure, maintaining current policy of vehicular gates. Going back to the left with the turquoise, add more legal parking further away from the beach or on an off-street location. So in other words, adding parking. What did they think of that? Second, and then moving across, another option, sell the road allowance lands at the shore to private owners. A very permanent solution indeed. And then going back to the left-hand side, partial sale, but retain emergency access easement to the beach. And then the last one to the right there, creating public parks. So then you look at what each of the property owners that responded to the survey said, and the results are organized based on their nearest survey. Sorry, their nearest road allowance that is there for them. So looking at Lorraine Road, maintaining the vehicular gates is deemed to be the most significant option. There was some benefit there for creating public parks, which is interesting in that particular location. Weaver Road, again, maintain vehicular parks as the most popular solution. Pinecrest, similarly, but also a recognition of the need to add more legal parking further back from the beach itself. And Pinecrest is one where there is some off-road parking there as well, or off to the side. Cedar Bay, again, vehicular gates seen as popular, but so too the idea of maybe a quarter of people saying creation of some level of public park in that location, presumably, and an addition of legal parking. Silver Bay, slightly different numbers. Wildwood, again, slightly different numbers. Pleasant Beach, a mix, 30% indicating more parking, almost a quarter saying public park as an option. And then, you know, we can talk about the numbers for Holloway Road. What this tells us, though, is you look very much, one of the issues that was of concern for people is the idea that we have an option, sell the road allowance at the shore to private owners. And as you can see from the results of the survey, as expected, that is not a popular option at all. So I think it's fair to say from, not only from our, from our understanding of legal issues and good public policy, but also backed up by the survey, it's clear that that is not an option that people want. And then, you can also see that the partial sale is one that has some traction, But again, that has to be very carefully considered, and I don't think it's probably likely to be an option that we would take forward at this point. Next slide. Out of the zone, this is just to give you the same information based on out of the zone, and not surprisingly, the number of people want to see more. If you just look at the colors there, the turquoise and then the sea foam. The turquoise is to add more legal parking. The sea foam is the creation of public parks. We'll probably have to work on some of the design of these graphs for the report to make them accessible, certainly. But you can see that basically people want access. If you're out of the zone, you're filling out the survey in large part because this is an area where you do come and visit and it's important to you. And the survey needs to take that on board. Next slide, please. So the next steps are, to develop a range of policy and planning solutions, as well as perhaps give people an opportunity to review these survey results in a bit more detail. It's as you can appreciate, we're trying to sort of rush it through this evening. It is on the public record in that it's a presentation to council, but we're happy to go through the connection between survey results, good planning, the observed conditions on the ground, and the options going forward. And so that's the work that we wish to continue to do and present that to the public again with full transparency, and then come back with a recommendations report that again can be deliberated until management and council are satisfied that we've got the right balance here. I think that's it, and I thank you very much for your patience in going through what is a lot of numbers. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. And remember, councillors, use your yellow hand to raise your hand to speak. Questions to Jonathan on this? Any questions this evening? Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Jonathan, if I may. Jonathan, on some of the graphs that you presented, you identified some N numbers. Now, N refers to the population of the study. Is that not correct?
Yeah, N is the sample size, the number of respondents in this case.
And when I look at that and I see in the graph where it is, why do you access the beach, you have 770 respondents to that, correct?
Well, yeah, so the ones that fill out the first questions, it amounts to 770 responses in total. There's going to be variation, as you can see, question to question, because some people don't complete that particular question for whatever reason. So we can't count that in the mix. So you'll see numbers do bounce around a little bit.
Okay, yeah, and that's what the question I had was, because I would expected it to be somewhat consistent, not to be deviating up to 20%, but there is a deviation of over 20% on those. And you didn't provide that stat on the other graphs, only on, I believe, 4 of the graphs that you have in here. Actually, only 3 of the graphs.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you for the question. Yeah, I mean, we can, certainly, Councillor, we can provide all of that detail if it's of value, whether it be in an appendix or some other form that you can go through just to see the efficacy of it all. You do find this is not a straightforward survey, in that there are 2 reasons for that. One is we're dealing with relatively complicated issues, and we're trying to get a non-biased survey across. And then secondly, we did open this up to out-of-zone residents as well. And as you can probably tell, some of the out-of-zone residents, there are some questions here which are just not necessarily relevant for them because they are not they don't live in the zone. And so that's part of the reason you might get some variation in the number of completed responses by individual question. But if anybody would like not only these percentages, but the raw numbers that go behind them, as well, we're more than happy to provide that to you and to anybody.
Thank you, Jonathan. I have another little question here. The question being, you on the one, why do you access the beach? Some of the questions are fairly close together on the answers. For example, why do you use the access? Why do you use it? Do you use it for walking to the beach and from the beach, and you use it for walking along the beach? Those are fairly close. I mean, you know, chicken egg, what comes first, what comes last? So I'm just wondering how you would interpret those types of questions differently.
Well, through you, Your Worship, I very much appreciate that question, and I'm a little bit curious myself. I don't have the survey to hand. I could probably bring it up on screen. In fact, I'll do that if I can. But the question I think that you're asking of me, and I'm sort of responding, is whether these questions were closed questions, meaning they were choice boxes that you provided, or whether we looked at all of the responses and then categorized these based on the open-ended responses, which is possible as well. And I do apologize, I don't have that answer to hand, but I can do so. But one of the things that we did want to get at in our understanding is that, you know, a lot of the properties have ownership going right onto the beach, right onto the sand, and in some cases right into the water. That's not always the case. And there are some parcels here around Cedar Bay, for example, that have what I'll call, for lack of a better term, horizontal land ownership. There's a strip that cuts across people's, you know, north-south divisions between their parcels, but really is a beach ownership strip. Point being that it's quite a complicated picture. And so to the extent that someone currently lives there, goes to the beach there, you know, after dinner on a summer's evening, and walks effectively across other people's property, and there's no problem with that, I think, you know, we wouldn't want to get in the way of that historical relationship. So we really do want to understand what people do on the beach, right down to that level of detail. But if you allow me, I appreciate the question. I'll see if I can get an answer to whether or not that's a close-ended question or open-ended responses.
All set, Councillor Wells?
No, I have.
Yep, keep going.
No, not yet. I have a little bit more. One just response to that is that when you speak about the strip cutting across the beaches, the road end allowance is more toward the 66 feet, not the beaches. And that leads me to the other comment that I have in regards to the photographs that are used. In the very first photograph of Shirkston Shores Echo Beach area, you're painting a very nice picture of that road end allowance when it's only 66 feet. So just looking for representation of the actual situation that we're dealing here. We're not trying to deal with the beaches. We're trying to deal with 66 feet of road allowance. So just to keep perspectives there, and also this here with a gorgeous picture of a beach, although it's beautiful and it's really welcoming and it's a great tourist attraction, some of our road ends we don't want that type of tourist attraction to the road end because it's unmanageable. Through
you, Your Worship, I just would agree. I mean, we're not trying to put rose-colored glasses on here. In fact, quite the opposite. The reality is that when you do go down to Pleasant Beach Road, as analysts, you know, we go around the country doing this, looking at places. That is part of the draw. People know there's a natural bay there, and the fact that it's owned by Shirkston Shores, outside of the summer season, people are going to access it. So it is a reality. We're certainly not advertising that we should be allowing people to, you know, I guess, trespass onto anyone's properties. That is the issue, the 66 feet. There are a couple of parcels either side of Cedar Bay Road that are these lateral parcels, and we've actually, the city has been helpful in giving us the assessment records, and some of these ownerships date back to the 1920s, but they're not in public ownership. You may have dealt with this issue before, and you're fully aware of it. But there are, some of these parcels would allow for potential expansion if you could get rights of access onto them, and if you have the concurrence with property owners, and I'm not sure that would be the case. So just to clarify, we do understand it's 66 feet, and that is a very constrained environment for quote unquote a beach. So what you will see when we come back with some potential physical solutions, we might not be talking about just bucket and spade down on the beach, but something which is still a definition of a public access point, benches or something further back from the beach. I mean, we have a number of solutions, but I do want to assure you that we're not going to overstep the mark in terms of painting this as parks when they're not.
Councillor?
Thank you, because one of the concerns is that you go off of that 66 feet on either side and you are trespassing.
Exactly.
And that could lead to some issues, except for the end of Cedar Bay Road, of course, which has got a little bit more than 66 feet. So thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. And just to council, with regards to Councillor Wells' one question, with regards to numbers of respondents for all these questions. If you would like that information, please contact via email CAO Louis, and he'll make sure that that's sent to everyone. I have Councillor Beauregard next.
Through your worship to Mr. Hack, thank you for the presentation. In the future, would you be able to combine the data that's currently in the 5-point scale for the questions that are on a 5-point scale for significant level? I'm just wondering if we can maybe turn that into a 3-point scale. It'd be interesting to see it from that perspective.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Through you, worship. Yeah, no. What we can do is obviously we can't actually reduce the categories from 5 to 3. What we can do is organize the results to include, for example, the significant and the very significant together, right? And that reduces you by one category. So as long as we present it based on what people have said, yes, we could see whether we could do that.
Yeah, yes, sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, take the data, combine them. And then I wonder if it'd be possible to do the same thing with those questions that regard to sell options. There's 2 questions there. One's the partial sale and the other one's just sell road allowance completely. I'm wondering maybe if you can show the data with those 2 combined, what that would maybe look like, because then that gives us an idea as to the selling mentality. So that's one other one. If there are any open-ended questions, will we be able to see the raw data on those questions?
Yes, there are open-ended questions, and we spent quite a bit of time to get it to this point of sort of general summary. So it's a lot of information. It is, I think it's part of your public record if you choose it to be. And the only thing I would indicate is that when we get any results in conducting this survey, we made it very clear to everyone that none of their individual responses would be disaggregated, would be publicly available. So I would just need to make sure that what we provided you in terms of things like an open-ended questions are exactly that, just the written open-ended responses without any means by which you could indicate who might have been saying that. It's just
okay. Okay. And my last one is more of a comment. In reading the graphs, I was having troubles deciphering because of the color of the charts. I was having a hard time deciphering which corresponded with what option. So I'm just wondering, and I'm just asking maybe in the future if you can maybe show a better contrast in the color scheme. That would be much appreciated.
No, absolutely. It was a younger colleague with better eyesight than I as well. So I need to, as you heard my comment, I think we need to just simplify it and give a bit more color. In fact, we are obligated, and I think you may know this, obviously, to when we do write a report, to do so with the accessibility lens on. So we have to. There will be changes to those.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, to John. John, when you do what Councillor Beauregard was asking about putting some of those either sell or partial sale together, will we still have access to the graph that actually splits those out? Because I think I'm not for putting those together. I don't know what that's going to tell us. I want to know those two things separate. So as long as we have that graph that we have seen tonight, I can live with any other graph you're going to come up by combining those. But
okay, well, through you, Your Worship, if I may, just to confirm, I think if council is okay with it, leave it with me just to consider the best way to address these particulars, because I understand what Councillor Beauregard is asking for, and I understand what you're asking for. And the other thing that we're all aware of, I think, when you look at this presentation, is graphs work to a point, but there's a lot of information, and to get to the issue of possible sale, we might just want to use numbers and text and just actually indicate that it was 5% or 3% of people that expressed an interest. It's probably the quickest and easiest way to convey the information. So I will work on doing that.
good. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walls, did you have another question, or is that your hand still up?
Yes, Councillor Bodnar prompted a question from me on this one here.
Thanks, go ahead.
Through you to Jonathan, I would like the data to see what's behind these graphs. The other thing is just a general comment in regards to the graphs themselves. When one looks at them, one would see that, or could interpret them as saying we don't, as a city, have a problem there. Everything was, the largest thing was insignificant throughout all of those graphs, and that jumps out and stands out that it could be perceived that we are not looking at anything of a significant importance. But I beg to differ on that, because it's my phone that rings. It's me and Councillor Bodnar that get all the phone calls during the summer regarding all of those issues that we see there. So to me, and I'm sure to Mr. Bodnar and the residents in this area, it is a significant issue.
And if I, through you, Your Worship, I just want to offer my complete agreement. There is work to be done to improve the situation, and when we come time to write a report, we wanted to give you just a sweeping picture of everything that had been reported. But you're absolutely right, and you may see us put the magnifying glass in terms of how we present this over those areas where there is a level of dissatisfaction, as opposed to reporting just insignificant. But I think it's important that, again, maybe we go from graphs to some useful tables that can just set the picture very clearly, and then get down to the areas where there are concerns. I think you can see from almost every graph we put forward, in terms of where the weight of the concerns were, it was over on that eastern side. It was Wildwood, Pleasant Beach. That's not a surprise to anybody, but there are other issues that are identified in the survey as well. So we will focus on those and not just make it appear like overall there is a level of insignificance that means you shouldn't do anything. That's not what we're trying to convey.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, seeing no further hands up, I'll thank Jonathan for coming out tonight. We look forward to his next trip back to us with more information. And as I said earlier, for those councillors that want the detailed numbers of respondents, please let CAO Louis know, and he'll make sure that those get to you. Great. Thank you again, Jonathan.
Thank you.